and welcome to Marketing Brew Workshops, our new virtual event series. I'm your host, Phoebe Bain, one of Marketing Brew's reporters, and we are so excited to kick off our new monthly virtual workshop where you can learn practical tips from the world's most interesting brands. Today's workshop is on Pinterest and how you can turn what I, in my personal opinion, consider an underutilized social media platform for marketing into a successful channel for your business. We're super excited to welcome two marketers from Vistaprint who will share their experiences using Pinterest and walk us through how to create a successful marketing strategy on the platform. So joining us for today's workshops are Vistaprint's Robin Van Cura, Senior Manager of Global Content and Marketing, and Femke Lenstra, Global Social Media Lead. So Robin and Femke, thank you so much for helping us kick off our event series. We've got a lot to cover in 30 minutes, so let's dive in. So Robin, there are a lot of social media platforms out there and obviously only so much time in your day. So based on your experience with Vistaprint, why would brand marketers choose to invest time and resources into Pinterest?
Great question, Phoebe, and thank you for having us. So Pinterest is a very unique platform in that it's more of a visual discovery search engine than a typical social media platform. So think about how consumers use it today. The search box is an essential tool on Pinterest. And because of this, you are able to build content on Pinterest that fulfills a very specific need. So additionally, Pinterest is at its core about great ideas and inspiration, and it allows users to discover, collect, and share their favorite pins. And lastly, unlike other social media platforms where your organic post peaks in 24 hours, on Pinterest, these pins only increase in search the more they are seen or pinned. So the value goes up over time.
Got it. That makes sense. So Robin, we'd love if you could, take us back to thinking about the very beginning of your time getting started with Pinterest. What is your advice for businesses that are just getting started on Pinterest and like a step one for figuring out what their strategy is going to be?
Sure. So the first thing you need to do is build your Pinterest playbook. I wish I'd known about this early on. It just helps so much to craft what your story is going to be and who you're going to be as a brand. So before getting started, you want to understand the purpose of the platform and why someone would follow you or pin your ideas. Pinterest, as I mentioned, is a place for inspiration and creative solutions. So what creative solutions could your business provide? Using an example, a baker, it might be providing great dessert ideas for every occasion. But for a financial consultant, that might be to provide, tips on making money as a baker other than just selling cakes. So it really, you can see how it could be very different and have very different purposes. And defining that early on is going to help you focus your brand. The second thing that I would mention is really your post frequency. So let me be the first one to tell you, lose the guilt. It is okay if you are not posting absolutely every day, but you do want to make sure that you're posting at a frequency that makes sense to you, and then stick with it. Publishing pins consistently gives people a steady stream of great ideas versus posting a bunch of pins like every Monday. So I would think about trying to stagger those pins versus doing them in bunches. And lastly, here is optimizing your pins from the start. This one is so super important. It's everything behind the scenes, and it is core to the success of your pin strategy. So everything about your pin provides Pinterest with data on where your pin should show up. So it's important you optimize for the best results. Some of the things you might want to think about is the name and description on your boards. That's key. That is information that Pinterest is going to be leveraging to figure out how to search for your content. Adding a category to your board will help with SEO as well. And make sure you have keywords in your copy, and even your link copy will impact searchability. So truly every little piece of your pin, the words, the boards, everything, you just want to make sure you're clearly thinking about SEO at all times.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Robin. I really like the idea of thinking of Pinterest as more of a mix between a search engine and a social media platform than just a social media platform. I think that's in part what makes it, again, so underutilized, but so unique, right? So now let's talk about creative and that type of strategy. Femka, you handle all the day-to-day of the Pinterest account for Vistaprint. So I'd love it if you could walk everybody listening through the creative considerations that you typically keep in mind when you're creating these pins and creating a strategy.
Sure. Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. So, just to talk a little bit about what inspiring content looks like on Pinterest. So, we all know Pinterest is a very visual platform, and the best pins are visually appealing, but also trigger people's curiosity. So, rather than telling people what is great about your product or service, show them what your product or service can do for people. Also, incorporate a human touch to help people visualize your product in their lives. But I would avoid images that are too abstract or imagery that is too focused on lifestyle, for example. There are better platforms for that, like Instagram, for example. So you really want to make sure that the main focus of your pins is on showing your product or service. And great pins are being helpful and authentic. They are actionable, very important, meaning that they clearly show how people can follow up after they've seen your pin. They introduce fresh ideas, but that at the same time are attainable. So ready-made ideas that people can directly follow up on or save on the board for later. Super important. I know we've heard it all a lot of times, but think mobile first. 80% of pinners access Pinterest from a mobile device. So when you add a text, for example, on your image, to make it stand out, make sure to keep it concise for readability. Take into account a pin is typically only on the screen for 2 seconds. Also, preferably use a vertical image with a 2 by 3 aspect ratio. This makes the pin stand out more in people's feed. And also, super important, branding. 97% of searches on Pinterest are unbranded, which means your brand can really stand out. Pins with subtle branding do better than pins without. So include a logo on your pins, preferably at the top, because on the bottom it might get covered up by a link or product icon. Always include products and branding in the top half of your pin. It's also a good practice on Pinterest. And lastly, add a clear CTA. For example, click to learn more or click to shop, and then a link to your blog or website. It's important to think about that journey again of someone that is watching your pin. Also, pins with a clear CTA have a 6% higher online sales lift.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Femke. I really appreciate you detailing all of that. Honestly, I think the most valuable advice there was that for Pinterest, you really do have to think mobile first. I know that's the case with, a lot of different social media platforms these days, but I think it's a good reminder and great to hear insight from people that are actually working with the platform, every day, day in, day out, that, people are usually on mobile, and that's, you need to be going vertical rather than horizontal. I think that's really great insight. So thank you again so much for going through those slides for us. This has all been really interesting, and I personally have a lot of questions after that. And I know that some people from our audience do as well. So I'd love to get to all of those before we wrap up later in the show. Also, for anybody who's just joining, welcome, Marketing Brew Workshops. We are here with Robin Van Kira, Senior Manager of Global Content Marketing at Vistaprint, and Femke Lenstra, Global Social Media Lead for Vistaprint. So let's get into a couple of these tougher questions that I have for both of you. Femke, from a marketing perspective, what is the biggest challenge that you as a social media marketer face on Pinterest?
I think the biggest challenge on Pinterest is getting found. There's a lot of pins being sent out into the world every day. So Robin mentioned it already before, but making sure that your pins are optimized for search. Again, Pinterest is a search engine just like Google. So really make sure the copy on your pins, but also the copy on your boards, on your Pinterest boards, is optimized on search. There are great online tools to find the best keywords and to really find out how you can write good copy for Pinterest. So yeah, spend some time on that and making sure to get found. Definitely a challenge, but also a fun one to figure out.
Got it. Robin, do you have anything to add there?
No, I think Femke's got it. That's probably the best advice you could have. One thing that is always really nice about Pinterest that it's kind of related but kind of not is really the search bar. So whenever you're trying to figure out what it is that you are looking to create or what you're really looking to focus on, I would, Femke was talking about finding keywords or so forth. Put in some of those keywords in that upper search bar and see what comes up as variations. It's a nice way of knowing what kinds of search words you might want to be putting in your post to again help it become more easily found.
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's so interesting to me that I think most people think of Pinterest as more of like a happy brand safe platform rather than like, a search engine that one would need to optimize for SEO and that kind of thing. So that's a really interesting takeaway for people to take away from this. So Robin, pivoting to that brand safety question, do you think that brand safety is an issue on Pinterest, especially as it compares to other platforms?
Well, I think brand safety has become a big topic as marketers have grown increasingly worried about brand safety on social media across the board. So it's a concern that is very valid. Consumers may form negative impressions of brands that appear near hateful or controversial content. So you really do have to think about being smart about it. Pinterest joined the Global Alliance of Responsible Media back in October 2020, I believe. So they did so they could work with advertisers and publishers and platforms to promote this safety, and have created some really interesting ways of making you feel more comfortable. And some of the things are like letting advertisers use targeting controls to decide where ads appear on Pinterest or in the Pinterest search. And also, one I love is the ability to use negative keywords to prevent ads from showing up in search queries where they don't consider it to be suitable. And lastly, they also even have search term reports to show brands which queries triggered their ads so that they can refine that list of negative keywords going forward. So it really does allow you to not connect yourself to the types of products or offerings or ideas that you don't want to be connected to.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously Pinterest, in your opinion, they do a pretty good job of keeping it all brand safe and making it easy for advertisers to stay away from things that perhaps they're not interested in their brand being associated with. But could you compare it to a couple other social media platforms? Like, do you think that Pinterest is really the most brand safe, or, we're not trying to sell Pinterest here, so you can be honest about it. But like, is there a platform more safe than Pinterest? And tell me why, if not. I mean, like, it's gotten this reputation as the most brand safe platform. So like, in comparison to Facebook, Reddit, etc., do you think that's true or untrue?
Well, I think that they're doing an amazing job. I think that they're taking the right steps to make themselves brand safe. To compare it to others, it's tough. These are different types of platforms, and I think anyone who has watched the news would know about some of the situations that have happened on other platforms, or the challenges that they come across. And I think all of our platforms are trying to find the best ways to be as brand safe going forward. But there are different challenges on different platforms. I think we just, as business owners or brand marketers, we just need to be smart about it, and we need to make sure we're using the right tools on each of these platforms, and we are approaching it in a way to make our brand safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Femke, do you have any opinion there on whether you think Pinterest is a particularly brand safe platform versus others?
Yeah, I think again it brings it down to the difference between Pinterest and other social media tools is that Pinterest isn't really a social media platform. So when it comes to brand safety, we have very different challenges on Facebook where people are going into conversations with each other, and that can get pretty ugly sometimes. We don't see that on Pinterest, right? But Pinterest has its own challenges because it's again people search on certain topics, and you want to make sure that your brand doesn't show up for certain keywords, for example. So yeah, just like Robin said, it's a different platform, different challenges.
Got it. Different platform, different challenge. Absolutely. I think that, I don't know, it's interesting. I mean, Pinterest has been less in that news discourse than many other social media platforms during the past couple months. So I imagine that Vistaprint's business was impacted by the pandemic in some capacity. So how did you adjust, and in what ways did social, particularly Pinterest, play a role? Femke, if you want to start off answering that one, that would be great.
Yeah, so it's been a crazy times, of course, for everyone, but especially for small business owners. Um, so I think what we did differently since the pandemic is maybe pull back a bit more on our paid media spend, and focus more on building out our organic muscle and really connecting with small business owners. So one of the things that we did is we had a board, especially about how to, for small businesses, how to reopen after COVID, or how to do great curbside pickup ideas. So we really try to focus on being, again, helpful and authentic, and really tap into what issues the small business owners were facing and how we could help them with a solution that was inspiring and a fresh new idea.
And I think, Phoebe, the other thing is, and I agree with Femke wholeheartedly. We started, as we started to pull back a little bit of the paid spend at the beginning, and really looked at what we could be doing organically. I think we were using our own muscles to try and figure out, how do you actually get found? And so all of this that we're talking about really making sure that you are getting those keywords, making the pin work as hard as possible for you. It's super important. And as a large organization like Vistaprint, we've had access to more funds to do more paid media than probably your average small business would. And we've been able to take a step back and really see how to do this on a budget. And it's been effective, and we can really see the difference when you're really clear on all of the back end words and keywords and searches and so forth to make Pinterest work for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good advice. Robin, I'm going to throw another one at you. So in your opinion, what is something that no marketer on Pinterest should do ever? Like, what is the biggest Pinterest marketing no-no in your mind?
Interesting one. It's a good question. I think I would say that you really should not blast your brand on Pinterest. I think it's really important to make sure that your idea or that inspiration is center to the storytelling. I do think you need to put your brand on there, but just do it in a more subtle way, because as they're scrolling all of these searches, you want to make sure the idea pops first. The other thing is probably not to put a ton of copy. Now, this is an image-driven platform, and I just spoke to you so much about making sure you have the right keywords and making sure it works for search and so forth, but don't go too heavy on all of that. This is a very different platform of inspiration, and you want to make sure that inspiration is front and center.
Absolutely. Femke, do you have any opinions there as something that people should never do on Pinterest if they're trying to market a brand?
I think to add to that, these were great points. I think what you also want to be careful about is to just be a broadcaster and just pin your own things and send your own messages out there. I would definitely also save other people's pins, look at other similar businesses like yours, and share some of their content on your board, and not only create pins, but also be an active user. Pinterest loves active users. So save pins, share with other small business owners ideas, and just have fun on the platform, I think is very important.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting what you were saying earlier about how I think you said 97% of the images on the platform are not like branded images. So, just as a follow up there, what's a good way to, post a pin for a brand without making it branded? Like, how do you draw the line?
So I think we mentioned it at some point, but we can get into that a little bit more. I think it's important to not put your brand front and center, but put the idea front and center. So be helpful and make sure you tap into the need of a user instead of, and it's difficult because we know our product is great and we know what about it is so great. So it's very tempting to just blast it out there and share all ideas and share your logo front and center. But again, keeping that focus on the user and what they are trying to do and really imagining that journey, I think it helps you focus a bit more on getting great content out there, but still advertising your brand and just associate your brand with helpfulness.
It's also,
Robin,
you just have to, yeah, no, I was just going to say, in agreement with that, you can have your brand there. We're not saying you shouldn't have your brand there. We just are saying don't blast your brand as the idea. You want to make sure that the idea it hangs as your major thought. But that being said, you can absolutely have some logo placement. And I think if you go to Pinterest, you'll also see some great best practices about where it should be located, so it's not overlapped with some of the features they may have. And you definitely want to get your brand out there and make sure you're getting some credit for this. Just don't make it your only thing.
Absolutely. So, Femke, I'll throw it back to you. How do you track success on the platforms?
Yeah, so Pinterest, first of all, has a great analytic tabs, has a great analytics tab. So it allows you to separate organic results from paid results, for example. So I would definitely recommend people to take a look at that and sort of deep dive into the results of their pins. I would advise everyone to try new things and to see really what works before making a big investment in creating a lot of the same content. So that is, it really depends also on your objective. What are you trying to achieve? I think for yourself and for every social platform, that is the first question you start with, right? What are you trying to do? And one example is leading traffic to your website. Well, you could create some great blog content for people, create a pin that gives a little bit away, not everything, and really trigger that curiosity. But if you're looking to keep people on the platform and really drive that on-platform engagement, think about doing video content and have a look at how the average watch time, for example, to see if people are engaged. And so it really comes down to keeping a sharp concentration on your objective, and then just look at the analytics tab to see if you're getting the return on that, basically.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, Femke, just the fact that you want to figure out what your metrics are first, and then you build to those metrics. If you're looking to have straight engagement on the platform, then you're going to want to, then if you do video or some sort of an animation like that, it's going to keep them on the platform, it's going to keep them engaged. If you truly want someone to click over to your site, then you want to create the best options for that as well. It's really about just making sure that you're adjusting your creative to support the metrics that are most important to you.
Great, I love that. Yeah, I think that's the case on a lot of social platforms that, it depends, but I'm glad that it, rings true here as well. So Robin, I know that we spoke about this a little bit before, but do you work with an outside agency or multiple agencies on your Pinterest strategy? And would you advise other marketers who are at brands that are, perhaps large enough to have that option to do the same?
Sure. So it completely depends on the organization. I've been doing social media at multiple larger brands, and I would say that we've done it differently in different companies. And it really depends on how you're set up from a creative team perspective. So in previous roles, I've worked with outside agencies. They've been wonderful. They're very focused on the social media objectives and often bring a lot of great insight to those that are looking to learn more. It's a great way to expand and start thinking about platforms differently. They sometimes bring some of that key new insight that you might have to do that research on yourself when you're working with an internal agency. But I think for Vistaprint right now, we primarily work with an internal agency, and we just have an amazing team that we're just very lucky to have that is helping us to create a lot of this great work that we do today. So in this role, definitely I'm working with an internal agency. In past roles, I've worked with external. I think there's just some nice balance and benefits to both.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, typical marketing answer, right? It always depends on the brand, but I'm glad you hear
I know,
that.
and not meaning to make it sound so generic. I do think that, your external agencies bring some very different ideas. It helps you to think outside of the box. I think we get very set in our ways in organizations, and sometimes working with external, groups brings new thought. I think we have done some interesting work. We're just about to kick off with TikTok, for example, which we happen to work with someone briefly externally on that, just to kind of do something a little different. But there's other things like that with Pinterest and almost everything else we do that we would use an internal agency currently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, great, guys. Thank you so much. This has been a very interesting conversation, to say the least. I do want to get to a couple audience questions before we go. I know we only have a few minutes left, but you were just talking about TikTok, which makes me want to ask this one first. So CJ, who owns a boutique marketing firm, asks, what is the sustainability of Pinterest advertising against new and up-and-comers like TikTok? I mean, in the new, content creator TikTok ecosystem, where does Pinterest fit? Is it going to stick around?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, some of these platforms do come and go, and some of them have stood the test of time, but they ebb and flow. And I think something like TikTok right now is on the top of everybody's minds. How do we get on, TikTok and make such a big impact? So maybe that's another one of these webinars in the future. But from a Pinterest perspective, the nice thing that they have is that, again, and I go back to some of our earlier conversations, they are more of a search engine than a typical social media platform. So they have a very specific place, a very specific, unique opportunity for people to inspire through this imagery, and the way it's set up being more search driven allows people to look for things very specifically and to build the post to speak to what people are searching for. I currently don't see any end in sight for Pinterest, knock on wood, but I certainly don't have a crystal ball. I think some of these other new ones that are coming up could give some of our other social platforms out there. We'll have to just see.
Yeah, I love that. Well. Go ahead, Femke.
Just to add to that, Phoebe, I think it's also a matter of the different platforms have a different function for people. Again, the user that is using Pinterest is in a much more active mode than the user that is looking at TikTok, for example, right? You have a lost moment. We all know how we can get lost on TikTok for hours. I think when people are on Pinterest, they're looking for ideas, and they're actively looking to create a nice board for the interior design of their living room, for example. So I think both platforms are absolutely important for business owners, but they just serve a different purpose. And I think they can both exist next to each other.
Absolutely. We're going to do one more super quick audience question. Femke, I think that you could take this one. So Aubrey, who's currently a student, asks, how are we going to convince people that Pinterest isn't just for pinning cool bed frames and that interior design stuff and nail art, but can actually be used in a professional way? Femke, if you could just give a one-sentence answer there. We have like 1 minute left.
I think Pinterest is, and maybe people don't realize, but Pinterest is definitely also a great place for learning and sharing learning content that is all about sharing ideas and great learning. So definitely share blog content and make people curious about what you have to offer on site. Um, yeah, inspiration can be found in all sorts of ways.
Great. Thank you so much, both of you. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today. But seriously, Robin and Femke, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who is watching, who took the time out of their day to tune in. I appreciate having you all here more than you know. So that puts an end to this one. But our next workshop will feature a conversation with the founders of Check My Ads, a consultancy that helps advertisers navigate the entire crazy world of ad tech. But for now, I'm Phoebe Bain from Marketing Brew, and we hope that you guys have a great day.